Okay, hello everyone. We are live streaming from Island Innovation on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, probably some other channels as well. And happy to be here to talk with one of our partners, the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, to give a little insight into the topic of conservation finance, specifically in the Caribbean region, and know a little bit more about what the CBF is doing on various levels. So, just for those of you who haven't come across Island Innovation before, we are a global network connecting island communities on sustainable development through various communication channels and virtual events. And one of our clients for an upcoming project is the CBF. And so, yeah, but maybe you can just give us a quick intro to what the CBF is, why it exists, and what your role is. And sorry, I should say your full name, Yabanex Batista, the CEO of the CBF.
Thank you so much, James. As always, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the space here for this interview to provide more information about the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, the work that we do in the region, and some upcoming events that we have in the month of July. Pleasure really to be here. In terms of your first question and what is the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, we are what it's called a conservation trust fund. And conservation trust funds are entities that dedicate themselves to the mobilization of financial resources for the environmental agenda. We do this in the Caribbean at the regional level. We are a regional conservation trust funds, and we work with about 12 island nations throughout the insular Caribbean. Our vision is that the work that we do is going to promote a thriving environment for people and nature. And our specific mission is, as I mentioned before, as a conservation trust fund, to mobilize financial resources so that we can ensure that the environment that we all depend on and the ecosystems that provide services to us continue to be here with us in the Caribbean and helping us have a thriving economy, thriving communities.
Fantastic. And so the NCTFs, the National Conservation Trust Funds, are a really important part of that structure. And I think it's interesting in the Caribbean region where you have a number of quite small countries that you provide that umbrella opportunity for collaboration between various countries. So it'd be good to know which are the countries that you're working in, or countries and islands that you're working in around the Caribbean, and then maybe a little bit more about how that is structured and why this regional approach makes sense for that work.
Yes, that's really an excellent question and point, James. Within the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, we have two main programs: our conservation finance program, which is anchored in our in our endowment fund, and then our climate change program, which is anchored in our ecosystem-based adaptation facility sinking fund. So these two instruments that I mentioned, the endowment and the EBA facility funds, are the financial instruments that really anchor the operations of the CBF. Under our conservation finance program and using the main instrument of the endowment, we create partnerships with national conservation trust funds to which we provide financial resources, and then they grant these resources for projects on the ground and in the water. But they take the decisions on how these resources are prioritized within the overall framework of the agreement that they have with us. And this is a very interesting construct, because all of us, the CBF and the National Conservation Trust Funds that we work with, we're all independent organizations, but we have come together under a single umbrella that we call the Caribbean Sustainable Finance Architecture to really work together as a force to mobilize financial resources for the environmental agenda in the insular Caribbean. So in a nutshell, we basically are a menu for many donors and partners that are interested in supporting financially the environmental agenda in the Caribbean. Through that program, we work with a number of countries. Right now, we have signed 9 partnership agreements, and we are hoping to sign 3 additional more with National Conservation Trust Funds. Right now, we work with the trust funds in the Bahamas Protected Area Fund, Fondo Marena in the Dominican Republic, the National Conservation Trust Fund of Jamaica in Jamaica, the Haiti Biodiversity Fund, of course, in Haiti, the MEPA, Marine Protected Areas Trust in Antigua and Barbuda, the St. Christopher and Nevis Conservation Foundation, the St. Lucia National Conservation Fund, the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund, and the Grenada Sustainable Development Trust Fund. Those are our key partners right now in the Conservation Finance Program. Under our climate change program, with the sinking fund of the EBA facility, we also work with a similar set of countries, but in this program and in this instrument, we handle the grant making process of the resources directly. And we don't have a primary partner in each country like we do in the Conservation Finance Program. We do open call for proposals, and different stakeholders, including governments, NGOs, academic institutions, can send us proposals to be evaluated. Right now, we are finalizing the second call for proposals of the EBA facility. We have noticed that there is an incredible demand for adaptation financing throughout the region. So our hope is that this sinking fund becomes a permanent instrument of the CBF and the overall financial architecture in the Caribbean in the future. These projects that we finance are really focused on how we can work with nature to help humans adapt to climate change. That is the gist and the core of the objective of the EBA facility.
Thanks for that overview. And just I really want to talk about your upcoming event, the Caribbean Conservation Finance Congress. That's why we're wanting to have this conversation in the lead up to that. But just before we go on to that, for people who may be less familiar with the Caribbean region or in the region, but maybe less aware of conservation issues, and I know we're generalizing over a huge region with many different issues on some level, but for you, in terms of conservation and biodiversity, what are some of the biggest challenges or the biggest threats that face the region? And maybe you have some examples of specific projects that are underway to kind of combat them.
Thanks, James. I mean, I think undeniably, the whole planet, every single human being really depends on nature for its survival. But in the Caribbean and island regions around the world, this relationship, it's truly a lot closer. Our economies, our livelihoods for a big part of our population are definitely directly related to nature. If you look at the Caribbean, we are, prior to the pandemic, one of the most tourism-dependent regions of the world, and our tourism is nature tourism. So that segment of our economies are incredibly dependent on having a healthy environment. We also have a lot of communities, coastal communities, that depend on the local fisheries for their livelihoods, for them to be able to continue to have healthy lives. And that is definitely very linked to our natural resources base. As islands, the biggest threat right now to us is climate change. We have already sea level rise is here for us. Erosion is rampant throughout the region. We are seeing the saltwater intrusion in aquifers already in many of the islands in the Caribbean. And as has been evidenced in the last few years, hurricanes are really battering many of our islands throughout the region. Most recently, Puerto Rico, Bahamas, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica have suffered incredibly from different hurricanes that have come across the Caribbean region. And this really sets back the economies of the island, it sets back people, and it also sets back all the conservation efforts that institutions like the CBF are trying to promote, because every time a natural disaster like this comes, a lot of our investments are literally lost in the sea. So we do have to work on not only conservation matters in the region, but we have to work on resilience, building resilience with nature, building new alternatives for preventing natural disaster, addressing natural disasters, using nature as a partner in the future. So our agenda is only getting broader and broader and broader. In addition to climate change, the unsustainable use of natural resources throughout the region is another key threat. Overexploitation of fisheries. We also have to deal a lot with land-based sources of pollution to water, which really damage our coral reefs, which again are where a lot of the life that we depend on, the sea life that we depend on, grows. And then the other threat, I would say it's key in our islands in general, is the accelerated coastal development. We in the Caribbean have one of the highest rates of urbanization of the coasts. And that means that we are affecting the natural flows of our environment in coastal and marine areas.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. And I think two things that you said there. One about the link between humans and the environmental conservation movement. We so often tend to think of them as two separate things, and you often see it, particularly in the Caribbean, how intertwined the economy is with conservation and how the society is with conservation matters. And then also on this financing element, you all as CBF sponsored our Island Finance Forum earlier this year, which looked globally at how finance plays an important role in sustainable development for islands and the specific challenges that small island developing states often have due to their small size or various other peculiarities of their economies, and have this quite unique need for this to be challenged. And so often in sustainable development, we have all these great ideas about things that we want to happen, and maybe a bit simplistic, but it comes down to money and how do we actually pay for those. So I'm really looking forward to this event that you're talking, or that we have planned not too far ahead into the future. So we as Island Innovation are working with you on the Caribbean Conservation Finance Congress, July 6th till 8th. Maybe you can just tell us why this is the first edition you've done of this event, why you came to this idea, and what you're hoping to achieve with it.
Thank you, James. This is really an exciting event, I must say. The first Caribbean Conservation Finance Congress is really looking at opening a dialogue within the region, but also with other parts of the world, on what are the financial needs that need to be tackled for conservation, for sustainable development to be successful in the region. So what we hope we will do with this Congress is to showcase and discuss the advances on conservation finance in general throughout the region, but really talk about financing solutions designed by the Caribbean for the Caribbean. Often we think in the region or in island states in general that we are too small to come up with our own financial solutions. And the reality is that yes, maybe we need help from the outside world, but we can come up with our own financial solutions because we are the ones that understand the environmental reality in our islands. So we really want to promote that aspect, the design of sustainable financing solutions by the Caribbean for the Caribbean. I would also like to highlight that part of what we aim to do in this Congress is to also establish a link between what is happening at the regional level on conservation finance, but also the international processes with which this year and perhaps early next year are going to be working on what are going to be the new international conservation targets to which countries are going to adhere through different multilateral environmental agreements. And for us in the CBF and our partners in the Caribbean Sustainable Finance Architecture, being able to connect that regional agenda on resource mobilization to the international agenda on resource mobilization is paramount, because we do see ourselves as an ally for our governments and for civil society in general throughout the region that can help the region really mobilize the financial resources that are required in the Caribbean in different areas. And in addition to that second objective of the event, we also want to promote different actors to get to know each other in this world of conservation finance in the Caribbean. So really promoting that network aspect, which is a lot more difficult to do nowadays, because before we were able to do meetings in physical meetings. We are doing this Congress in a virtual setting, but with your help in Island Innovation, we are coming up with some really great ideas on how to promote networking and knowledge exchange through virtual platforms. And that's why for us, it's really great to partner with you in this event. I would also like to highlight that this first Caribbean Conservation Finance Congress, we are co-organizing together with our partner National Conservation Trust Fund in St. Lucia, the St. Lucia National Conservation Fund. They are a key ally of ours for this event. And I would really like to encourage all of you that are listening to us today to go visit our website, caribbeanconservationfinance.org, and that's the website for the event, and register and participate. Thank you, James.
Fantastic. And I think it's really important to highlight about this event that it is free of charge, and that we worked together on a different event last year. And I know in an ideal world, we'd all be together in St. Lucia discussing these issues in person. But I'm just curious, I mean, there's obviously pros and cons to going virtual, and who knows what these events will look like in the future. But I know we've talked a bit about in a region like the Caribbean, where it's so expensive to travel and quite challenging to travel around, there is a really interesting opportunity for using these events. I don't know if you have any comments on how you've seen this change in how we do these type of meetings over the last year, and how that's impacted your work on a regional level.
That is definitely true, James. I think from the event we did last year, which was different from the one we're doing this year, what we saw is that we were able to have a longer reach in terms of audience. We were able to provide the message on conservation finance, even in the last event we did last July, to a broader audience. And that has been actually very important for us in this period of the pandemic, and I think into the future, because a lot of what we need to do in this world where we work in the CBF is to reach as many audiences as possible. And through the virtual platforms, we are being able to expand that reach. I think down the road, what we'll probably end up seeing is a combination of virtual and physical events. I think that the virtual mode has become an ally for all of us. We have all seen that while we miss meeting in person, we are also recognizing the value of being able to meet virtually as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's worth highlighting as well that I know you have speakers from the Indian Ocean, in the Seychelles, and the Pacific from Hawaii. And again, that kind of regional exchange with other small island developing states region, I think, is a really good opportunity coming out of this to learn how maybe these other regions have approached those issues. So for anyone watching, caribbeanconservationfinance.org, it's free to register. We'll post a link in the comments as well, so you can register for that, and I hope people will be able to join those sessions on July 6th till 8th, organized by the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund and the St. Lucia National Conservation Fund. Yaba, it's been really good to talk to you. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, James, thank you so much for the opportunity. Really, I hope many of you listening can join us. It's going to be an exciting event. I think we're going to be breaking new ground in the Caribbean, and I really hope that fellow islanders from other parts of the world can join us as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much for chatting today. And for everyone who's watching, we'll see you virtually next month. Bye-bye.